How's it going? And welcome back to another episode of Mood for Feud. I'm your host Katia, and today I am in the mood to talk about Jennette McCurdy. We're going to get into the complicated relationship she had with her mother and the abuse that she detailed in her memoir, I'm Glad My Mum Died. And this is also a part 2, so if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, make sure you check that out. I will have it linked in the show notes down below. Remember, if you enjoy the show and would like to support it, then please do leave a rating. You can leave comments on Spotify, written reviews on Apple Podcast, and you can follow the show so you never miss an episode. I'm also on socials at Mood for Feud, and I'm always looking to chat pop culture, so send me a message there. Okay, first of all, where was last week's episode? I don't know what happened. I lied. I said I was going to put out a bonus episode and it did not happen. And if you have listened to the previous episode I put out, you'll know that I was moving last weekend. Oh my gosh. I mean, let's just say I am glad it's behind me. But yeah, it was just super busy and there was no time for recording, which made me so sad because I've been really trying to be consistent. And so far this year, I feel like I've done that. I think I've had a couple of late episodes, but for the most part, I was recording every single week. And yeah, anyway, that's just life. But thank you for being patient and I hope you enjoyed this episode. So we ended part 1 with Jennette entering iCarly. She was playing Sam Puckett, and this was like her big debut to Nickelodeon and also her breakthrough role. So this was really where she went from being an aspiring actress to a successful actress and someone who, had a really promising acting career ahead of her. One of the things that Jennette mentioned a lot throughout her memoir was her friendship with Miranda Cosgrove, who was obviously her co-star in iCarly. And I was so happy to hear that Miranda Cosgrove was a really good friend to Jennette and someone that Jennette was very close to, that she even eventually confided in. And she even eventually confided in Miranda about her eating disorders. Still, I think just to at a surface level. But I'd say out of everyone in Jennette's life at the time, Miranda was like the only non-family member who became really, really close to Jennette. And I was very happy to hear this because I was like, please do not tell me that the wholesome, kinda dorky Miranda Cosgrove is like a massive bitch or something. Like, I was not ready to have that kind of news into my life. Yeah, I was like, thank God she is actually seemingly just a great friend. Jennette describes that when she first met Miranda, she seemed really mature compared to her and really independent, which makes sense because of how locked down and infantile Debra had been keeping Jennette. You kind of get the vibe of there's a bit of an insecurity there with wanting to be friends with Miranda, but then at the same time feeling like she didn't quite match up to Miranda. And I found this whole aspect of her memoir so relatable because I think most friendships when you're a preteen or a teen, unless you were just crazy popular in school or whatever, but for most people I would say that is quite a relatable thing, right? When you meet someone cool and you're like, oh my god, I really want to be their friend, but then you also have this little bit of insecurity of oh, why are they so much cooler than me? Why do they seem so much more grown up? And why do they have everything figured out and I don't? She writes about this moment in her book saying, on set, Miranda said cuss words like shit and ass, and she told the Lord's name in vain at least 50 times a day. So again, things that Jennette would never dare to do. She would never swear, she would never take the Lord's name in vain. And I cracked up at this as well because it did make me think of the Miranda Cosgrove meme where she's like, I actually do cuss a little. Here we have it in writing, written proof that she does actually cuss a little.
I actually do cuss a little.
Do you?
Also, yeah.
What's your favorite curse word?
Probably fuck.
Another moment where we kind of see this little bit of insecurity is when they are about to start filming the show and Miranda sent Jennette a gift basket, kind of like a, excited to work with you, that kind of a gift basket. And Jennette says that Miranda's one had all these cool snacks in it and a voucher for the movie theater and just it seemed really cool. She obviously wanted to return the favor, but bear in mind the family isn't financially well off yet. obviously Miranda had come from Drake and Josh, so I imagine that she herself was probably already living a type of lifestyle, right? She was already a well-known actress, at least in the Nickelodeon space. But Jennette was fresh to the game, and this is before they've started, so they don't actually have any paychecks yet. And she remembers feeling really inadequate, like, oh, how do I get a gift basket together that's even comparable to the one that Miranda sent her? And she recalls going shopping with her mom, trying to find stuff, and her mom ends up picking out this like soft toy that's like a teddy, and she does end up giving that to Miranda, and she's so self-conscious about it because she's like, this is so dumb, we're too old for teddy bears, like, oh. But Miranda, the queen, was very gracious and thanked her for the gift and didn't ever like say anything that made Jennette feel like it wasn't a good gift. So honestly, bless her. When they started filming, Miranda asks Jennette if she has an AIM account. Oh my gosh, throwback. We love to see it. And of course, Jennette didn't have one, right? Like, as if Debra would ever let her have her own, like, messaging app. But because of this, she decides to make one, and she keeps it secret from Debra. And I would say this is, like, the first time in the memoir that we see Jennette kind of take a bit of liberation from her mum, or start to sever that relationship just a little tiny bit. And it's kind of prompted by Miranda. And so her and Miranda do start exchanging messages quite frequently. And yeah, I think Jennette is downplaying to Debra how close her and Miranda are getting. But in reality, they're like in constant communication. They hang out on set, they message when they're not on set, and so they do start forming a really close friendship. And it's really cool because I think this is the first time that Jennette would have experienced something like that, would have experienced a female friendship that she is close with, because, you know, Debra would always make her feel kind of fearful of being close with women. Debra herself didn't really have a lot of close female friends. The ones that she did have, she would like badmouth behind their back to Jennette and always say to her, like, you know, women aren't actually your friends, they're people you compete with, and to always be cautious of them. And so Jennette didn't have any close female friendships. This was like a really novel concept for her. And she says she was much more trusting towards boys or men than she was towards women. And, you know, especially because in her home, the only woman she was close to was her mom. And then everybody else, like, she loved her brothers, but they're all boys. So yeah, she just hadn't experienced this before. She says something that Debra would always say to her is, quote, "Men will never really know you and they'll hurt you, but women will know you deeply and then they'll hurt you. You tell me which is worse." So very similar sentiments to Ariel Winter's mum, Chrysula, who we covered in another Mummy Dearest episode. Yeah, Chrysula and Debra both push this narrative onto their daughters that you can't trust women. And I said this last time, and I'll say it again now, that makes me so sad, because some of the most important friendships and relationships in my life are from women. So I couldn't imagine not having this. But I'm very, very, very happy that Miranda kind of broke down that narrative for Jennette and showed her that women can uplift and empower one another. And then another reason why Debra didn't like Jennette hanging out with Miranda so much was, of course, because she felt like Miranda was a really bad influence. You know, she was very independent compared to Jennette. She had a lot of freedom. Later on, when she got her license, she had her own car, and, you know, so I think Debra saw someone like Miranda and felt very threatened that she was going to come between her very close bond with Jennette. And Miranda also didn't believe in God, and this was, of course, like a very big no-no for Debra. Now, after iCarly finished up, Miranda and Jennette stayed close. Jennette describes being scared that once the show wraps, they wouldn't maintain contact because they're not seeing each other every week. But it was actually kind of the opposite thing, where they started hanging out even more and just made even more effort to spend time together. And Miranda would have Jennette over for sleepovers and give her kind of a reprieve from her mom. They would do road trips together, and I really think Miranda was like a bit of a reprieve for Jennette. Like, it was like a little escape for her. And even though they're not that close anymore in like present day, Miranda did say some, supportive statements when Jennette's book was released. And I don't really think anything necessarily happened. I feel like they more or less just started to drift apart, and Jennette's obviously been through a ton, and then post her mum dying has done a ton of work on herself and done all this therapy. And I feel like when you're being so intensive about healing yourself, you're going to lose some of those friendships because they're going to be too hard to maintain, and that's okay. And I do also think that like there's different seasons of friendship, right? So when they were on Nickelodeon or when they were young, they had a lot more time for one another. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then as you get older and, you move in with a partner maybe, and then you just start seeing your friends less or less. As sad as that is. Sometimes, obviously not all the time. I have seen speculation online. People are like, ooh, what happened? What's the tea? Why do they not talk all the time anymore? What happened? And I don't know. I think, maybe something did happen. Jennette's never talked about it. Miranda's never talked about it, at least not directly. And I don't know if something would have happened because as far as I can tell, there's like no bad blood. And I mean, the way Jennette wrote about Miranda like couldn't have been more flattering. So, but yeah, anyway, shout out to Miranda Cosgrove. I was so happy to hear that she was able to like be a breath of fresh air for Jennette and help her through such a difficult time, and that she's a good person. Yay. Another person from Nickelodeon that Jennette spends some time talking about is, of course, Dan Schneider. And he created the TV show iCarly and then also later made the spin-off that Jennette was in called Sam and Cat. But he also created a bunch of other Nickelodeon shows like Victorious, which was also very popular at the time. And Dan Schneider is kind of known for being, I think, abusive. I don't know if he's ever actually been like formally charged, but he is weird. Like when I tell you, he just gives inappropriate towards minors, which is of course super problematic because he works on this network that is geared towards children and creates television starring children. So fucking recipe for disaster. And I'm sure we will do an episode on him at some point. There is a documentary called Quiet on Set, which details some of those experiences that child stars had working with Dan Schneider. At the very least, I think we know he was verbally abusive. Like he would scream at people on set. He was not a nice person. And so at the very least, I think that is like commonly known and accepted. But I do, in my heart of hearts, think that he was a creep. And we won't get into it now, but there's a lot of clips or compilations that people have put together of just really weird storylines in some of his Nickelodeon shows that then result in actors doing like sexually suggestive things, right? So that's fucking weird because the actors in question are minors. So like, why is he getting them to do that? And just a lot of his content seemed to pander to predators. But it was, of course, it's not obvious if you're not either A, looking for it, or B, that kind of a person, right? Like, so when I was a kid and watching it, it never really occurred to me how weird some of the shows were. And then now when you watch some of those storylines back, it's like, oh, yikes. Like, it seems to be pandering to predators. Ugh. Anyway, I was very interested to see how Jennette would handle this because there's a lot of buzz around Dan Schneider and people get asked about him a lot if they did star in his shows. But Jennette didn't actually name Dan Schneider in her book, and this is probably because of defamation. So instead she has a character called the Creator. Now, of course, this is Dan Schneider, right? Because he created the show, so who else would that be? In her interview with Louis Theroux, he does say, like, can I say the creator? The creator's Dan Schneider, right? And she doesn't say anything, and he goes, you don't have to say it, but I'll say it. The creator is Dan Schneider. And she doesn't correct him. So, like, if in case you were like, oh, that causes some kind of doubt in my mind, like, it is Dan Schneider. There were probably legal reasons for why she didn't want to use his name. And the other interesting thing is apparently, according to Reddit, the Kindle version of the audiobook, which Jennette read out, apparently she accidentally called him Dan at one point and they had to like change it. So I don't know why I'm trying to like convince you because I feel like no one is arguing that it's not Dan Schneider, but I guess just in case you had any doubt. So she says about the creator can tear you down and humiliate you. I've seen him do this when he fired a 6-year-old on the spot for messing up a few lines on a rehearsal day, and when a boom operator accidentally dropped the boom into a shot and the creator stomped over to him and screamed in his face. So there you go, he sounds freaking awful to be around. Her mom is of course instantly enamored by Dan Schneider, and this is because she looks at him and she sees opportunity for her and Jennette to climb the ladder, right? He is an important decision maker at Nickelodeon, and if you're in with him, you can either have a good time with the network, and if you're not in with him, it's going to be miserable, or your career is even going to get cut short. He's like the Harvey Weinstein of Nickelodeon, is how I would describe him. So Debra is of course all into this, and she emphasizes very heavily to Jennette that Jennette needs to make Dan happy, and really encourages Jennette to tell Dan about her cancer so that he can kind of take pity on them. And anytime they have a dinner with Dan, her mum's always going, you know, when you talk to him, you have to smile really big. Remember to smile super wide and laugh at all the things he says. Like, she's really training her, like, we need to appease him, which puts a lot of stress onto Jennette, because Dan Schneider, kind of like Debra, is a bit of a loose fucking cannon in that he can flip-flop his emotions. And Jennette's talked about this and said whenever he was having a good day with her, she was always on edge because she never knew how long it was going to last for. And he could like turn on you just like that and go from being really happy and buddy with you to then like screaming at you and humiliating you in front of everyone. So it wasn't like a really emotionally stable person to be dealing with. And Jennette's already pandering to one fucking weirdo psycho, which is her mom, and now she has to pander to like this other weirdo psycho too. So you can imagine why she was so stressed out about all this. And early into iCarly, Dan kind of realizes how much of a fan favorite Jennette's character Sam Puckett is, and so he tells her and Debra that he is planning a spin-off show titled Just Puckett, which will have Jennette playing the lead role. And of course Debra is over the moon, and he says we can't release it just yet because it's still too early since they released iCarly. They need to let iCarly breathe for a bit and, you know, stand alone, and then they can introduce this. So it became this like carrot that got dangled, but it also meant that Jennette had to be incredibly cooperative throughout iCarly, otherwise they risk losing her show where she's going to be the star. And so she does suck up a lot of her feelings, like she's done her entire fucking life so far, and she does her best to appease him, even though there are moments where he does cause her discomfort. So let's go into some of those. I think this is one of the first ones that she details is she's getting ready for a photo shoot for iCarly, and the theme is like they're all in swimwear, and the wardrobe designer is trying to get Jennette to wear a bikini. Remember, Jennette was 15 years old, I think, when she first got cast in iCarly, so we're talking about a teenager here, expected to be in a bikini that's going to then get probably turned into promo that's going to get plastered all over everywhere. I wonder why she was not comfortable. I mean, come on. Jennette doesn't want to show her body. This is like another thing. It's like super linked in, I'm guessing, with her eating disorder, is that she didn't like people ogling at her body or people looking at her body. The wardrobe designer's like, no, you look great. Like, you look so fantastic. Come out, honey. Like, oh my gosh, you look so good in your bikini. Jennette's trying to say, like, can I just wear a one piece? Like, why do I have to wear this specific thing? And the wardrobe designer tells her the creator, Dan Schneider, specifically requested that the girls are in bikinis for this photo shoot. Fucking disgusting. This show is marketed towards like 10-year-olds, and let me tell you, 10-year-olds do not care if their leads in the show are wearing a one-piece suit. I could have had Sam Puckett in a rashie and some board shorts and I would have still been like, hell yeah, I'm watching the show. Like, there was absolutely no need for them to be in bikinis. He put his foot down for that, which that fucking grossed me out so bad. Another moment she talked about is when she had her first kiss, which happened to be on set of iCarly. So it was for the TV show. And I do always feel really bad for child stars when their first kisses are on screen. I think this is something that Alison Stoner potentially has talked about as well. Allison was another very prominent child star from around the same time who has since done a lot of work, you know, talking about the abuse that they suffered. And I remember Allison saying that there is literally nothing worse than having your first kiss, the first time you experience this type of thing, such an intimate and personal moment, happen on set with cameras rolling and 30 crew members and a director yelling at you. So yeah, I do always feel bad when a child has to go through that. So this kiss is between her and her co-star Nathan Kress, and he plays Freddie in the TV show. I remember this episode, which when reading about it from her perspective was like crazy, because I remember this episode so vividly because it kind of kickstarts Sam and Freddie's like relationship. She did look awkward during it. She looked awkward when they filmed it, and I genuinely thought this was just her being Sam Puckett, because in my mind, Sam Puckett, who's like super tomboy and like always, I guess, like tries to prank Freddie or is kind of always being a little bit mean to him, like maybe this type of character would be awkward kissing someone, right? But after reading her experience on the show, I actually think that that might have just been Jennette's awkwardness. So yeah, I do feel super bad that she had to go through that. And what's worse is because she was so awkward, Dan had them reshoot it multiple times, and I think they ended up doing 7 takes of it, so she just had to go through that over and over and over again. I'll read out a little excerpt where she describes it because I think it just really gives you a good idea of how her mind is like racing while she's in this deeply uncomfortable situation, and yet there's this whole expectation of her to like deliver what they need to film. Our lips are touching. He's moving his mouth around a bit, but I can't move mine. I'm frozen. His eyes are closed, mine aren't. Mine are wide open, staring at him. It's so odd, staring at a person while your faces are touching. I don't like it. I can smell his hair gel. Move your head around a bit more, Jennette, the creator yells from off camera. I try to do as the creator tells me. I honestly try, but I can't bring myself to do it. My body is stiff, unflinching. My body is rejecting my mind. My mind is saying, who cares that this is your first kiss, that your first kiss is on camera? Get it over with, do what you're told. My body is saying, no, I don't want this. I don't want my first kiss to be like this. I want my first kiss to be a real first kiss, not a kiss for a TV show. I disdain the part of me that's romantic. I'm embarrassed by it. Mum's been very clear about how boys are a waste of time and will only disappoint me, and how I should just focus on my career, which I get. So I try to force it away. But as much as I try to force it away, that romantic part of me is there, and it's been there for a while. I wonder about boys sometimes, what it would be like to love one. Cut! The creator yells off camera, his mouth full of something. I hear his footsteps as he pads over to us, carrying a paper plate piled with cheese slices and unwrapped mini candy bars. The crew parts like the Red Sea, letting the creator pass by them and walk up to us. The creator looks me right in the eye but doesn't say anything for 4 or 5 seconds. I almost start to laugh, thinking he might be messing with me for fun like he does sometimes. But then I recognize that there is a deep anger in him. This is no time for laughter. Finally, he speaks. Jennette. More head movement. He turns and walks away. Why aren't we rolling? He shouts. The cameras roll. We start the scene. I don't even know the words coming out of my mouth, but I trust that they must be the words that were written on the page, because nobody's stopping me and saying I'm speaking gibberish. It's an out-of-body experience doing the scene leading up to the kiss. My heart is pounding, my hands are clammy. Here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. We lean in, our lips touch, lips feel nasty. They're like little gross, fleshy piles of flesh. It's disgusting to be a person. Oh man. First of all, I think that does such a great job of just painting the scene for like what it felt like for her in that moment. And second of all, do you see what I mean with how well written this book is? Like, I mean, come on. I felt like I was there. Like, I felt like I was standing in her shoes, you know? Another moment that Jennette brings up between her and Dan is during the dinners that they would have together. And this started happening more and more frequently as he was developing Jennette's spin-off show. They would have dinners together and he would tell her how lucky she is to have been picked by him, and, you know, kids would kill for this kind of opportunity and he chose her and she's so special. And they would have these little dinners, which Debra was of course always over the moon with. And sometimes Debra would be there, sometimes it would just be Jennette and Dan. Again, so fucking weird. Like, why is this grown man who's in a position of power having dinner with a minor? Like, make it make sense. So at one of these dinners, she describes that Dan tries to get her to try some alcohol. He's like, have you ever had a drink before? And she says no. And he's like, oh, you should try this. And is really trying to convince her. And Jennette's trying to say she doesn't want to. She has no interest in consuming alcohol. This prompts Dan to tell her, like, you iCarly kids are way too wholesome. The Victorious cast have way more edge to them. This is apparently something he would do quite often, like pit the iCarly cast against the Victorious cast and vice versa, and create some kind of like bad blood between them, or make it like a competition, or use it as leverage to try convince people to do stuff. Like in this instance, right? Like, well, all the Victorious kids do it, but I guess they're just so much edgier than you, Jennette. This is interesting to me because I think later when Jennette does get her spin-off show, it's Sam and Cat. That's the TV show. She's the co-lead alongside Ariana Grande, who was of course in Victorious. And as we will get into later in the episode, her and Ariana clashed a lot on set. They did not have that same kind of friendship bond that her and Miranda did have. And I'm wondering whether part of that was because for years leading up to that, they'd already kind of been pitted against one another indirectly with Dan's weird obsession of comparing the two casts of the two shows. In the end, she does decide to have a little sip of alcohol and, like, she doesn't like it, obviously. At this point, she describes that he again reminds her how lucky she is and how many people would kill to have their own show, and then he puts his hand on her knee and she gets goosebumps because she's so fucking uncomfortable. He misreads this as her being cold, so he takes his jacket and kind of drapes it over her shoulders and then starts to massage her shoulders, telling her she's so tense and she just needs to relax. And she writes, she was tense, but she really didn't want him to be the one to massage the knots out of her shoulders. So she's super uncomfortable, but she doesn't feel like she's in a position to tell him that, so she kind of just sits there and puts up with it. Of course she's not going to tell him she's uncomfortable. Are you kidding me? Like, this man holds the future of her acting career in his hands, and even though her acting career isn't important to her, it's important to Debra. So of course she's going to just sit there and grin and bear it. It's what Debra would want her to do in that moment. Also, she's a child and he's like a gross old man. Like, oh my god, disgusting. Now, eventually, I think this is later when they're filming Sam and Cat, but complaints about Dan's behavior on set get so bad that he actually has to sit in a separate room from the cast and crew. He's not allowed to directly interact with anyone. Jennette writes, the creator sits in a small cave-like room off to the side of the soundstage, surrounded by piles of cold cuts, his favorite snack, and Kids' Choice Awards, his most cherished life accomplishment. He watches our takes on 4 separate monitors, one for each camera, that are set up in his lair. Whenever he wants to give us a note, he tells it to an assistant director, who then has to run across the entire soundstage to give it to us. So our shoot days went from about 13 hours to about 17. The general on-set vibe these days can best be described as malaise meets, dear God, please let's get this over with. I was gobsmacked when I read this. I was like, why was he so essential to the show that the network would pay everyone overtime to stay longer, make everybody else suffer just to keep Dan as the show creator? Like, what was so special about him? I just don't understand. The shows that I've seen, I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe coming up with the concept is hard, but I feel like anyone would have been able to pick up and continue running them and probably improve them and take out all that weird predator pandering shit. So what? Like, did he have blackmail over the CEO? Like, why was he so valued at the network? I just couldn't believe it. And then my other question was like, what kind of mother would see this type of person and be like, hell yeah, I want my daughter to have dinner with him. Hell yeah, we should do everything in our power to please him. Like, oh my gosh, no one was looking out for Jennette, except for maybe Miranda, but like another child, great. Like, there was literally no adult in her corner. It makes me so, so sad. In 2007, there is a writer's strike, and so iCarly, the show, goes on hiatus. This is when Jennette pursues her country music career. And Jennette is a great singer, I will say this. And so her mum was very interested in her doing this. The problem, I guess, was that iCarly eventually picked up again and started filming. But Debra felt like Jennette should still continue her country music career as well as her acting. So during the week, she would film iCarly, and then on weekends, she would fly to Nashville and work with her songwriters and producers to record country music. Like, what a fucking hectic schedule. And so they start planning this tour for Jennette to debut some of the singles that she's put out and perform them, you know, all across the country. Debra's initially meant to go on this tour with her, of course, but in the weeks leading up to her going, Debra's cancer came back. And so she was no longer able to go because she had to do her treatment. Of course, Jennette felt conflicted. She didn't want to go on her tour anymore if her mum was unwell. But Debra insisted. She's like, no, you have to do this. You're such a talented singer. And I really, really want you to, you know, do the tour. So she does. And this is the first time in Jennette's life that she has been away from Debra for like more than a day at a time, or more than a couple of hours. Like, probably a sleepover with Miranda is like the longest stint of time she's had without Debra. And, you know, she can shower herself. Like, that was already massively liberating for her, and she could choose whatever she wanted to eat. Now, unfortunately, this kicked off Jennette's binge eating. So before this, Jennette had been, you know, as we covered in part 1, really struggling with anorexia. On this country music trip is when she is deep into throes of binge eating. And when she returns from her trip and her mum sees her again, her mum tells her that she's gotten way too chunky. Like, oh my God, shut up, woman. Shut the fuck up. Now, Jennette says that she doesn't feel connected to the music she's singing at all. They were all co-written by a team of writers. And for example, one of her biggest singles is called Not That Far Away. And it's all about how much she misses her mom while she's away trying to kickstart her music career. The chorus says, "Mama, I promise I'll be all right. I'll call and say I love you every night. I'm just trying to write the story of my life." And Debra, of course, is obsessed with this song. She loves it. She loves the idea of this entire song being dedicated to how much Jennette loves her and how much Jennette misses her while she's away. And it kind of mimics, I guess, their current situation with Jennette touring and Debra being back in California. And I watched a radio interview, I think I will play a clip of it, where they kind of ask her, like, oh, like, what inspired the song? And she tells them, like, oh, you know, it's all about how much I miss my mom. And it's just so awkward. And especially knowing what we know now about this relationship with Debra, it's like, baby girl was lying. Baby girl was lying. But anyway, I'll play the clip.
We having fun yet, anybody?
Yeah! Woo! Thanks,
That's
guys.
our goal. That's our promise.
This song is called Not That Far Away. And it's a song that I also co-wrote, and it really describes exactly what I'm going through with venturing into country music and how I'm far away from my mom and I miss her. But I'm just having so much fun here, so it's that, you know, bittersweet feeling. Mama, I promise I'll be alright. I'll call to say I love you every night. I'm just trying to write the story of my life.
Another thing that Jennette experienced whilst on this trip is her first kiss. Her first, like, proper kiss that's not for a TV show. And it's with one of the musicians that she's touring with. And she kind of describes, like, feeling really curious about what it would be like to kiss someone that she is actually interested in kissing. And again, I think it was, like, another sense of freedom for her. So, you know, she's being mature now. She's like pursuing romantic interests, even though Debra had always told her that boys were a waste of time. She's eating whatever she wants, unfortunately in a binge eating way. But she's also like just having a bit more freedom and enjoying it, and then feeling guilty for enjoying it. She describes coming back from tour and seeing how much more frail her mom looked because she'd obviously just gone through a bunch of chemotherapy, and just instantly feeling so much guilt at her mom going through all that while she was having a good time on tour. Like, it really sucks she wasn't able to enjoy being away, you know, getting some freedom. She does end up calling it off with the musician guy. She says that afterwards, you know, they kept trying to like have romantic encounters, I guess, and eventually she just started getting a bit grossed out by it all, and like she just didn't like being physically intimate with him. When Jennette is on Red Table Talk with Jada, Willow, and Adrian. They actually bring in a therapist to talk through some of the things that Jennette has spoken about and give that kind of perspective on it. And the therapist says that this is something very common for children whose mothers were invasive with their intimacy. So how Debra would shower Jennette and give her her private parts, like examinations and stuff like that. All of this culminates into someone then struggling to have other forms of intimacy with other people. Jennette does say, growing up, she really struggled to hug people. Any kind of physical contact was really difficult for her, and I think we see this with this relationship too. And Jennette's also said that her anxious attachment to her mum really impacted the types of relationships that she had as well. She exhibited intense attachment and codependency with people that she dated, and she would enter into these all-consuming relationships, almost as if she is switching out the codependency with her mother to being codependent with someone else. That's kind of the only relationship type that she knows, so that's her default or what she's comfortable with. She describes another relationship she had with someone who she calls Joe. I think he was a colleague. She enters into a relationship with him in 2012. She says it's interesting to her because Debra's cancer had come back. Debra also around this time was starting to deteriorate. I think deep down Jennette knew that her mum wasn't going to beat cancer again. This was going to be her last fight with it. And around this time is when she enters into this relationship with Joe. And she says it was almost like she was trying to desperately find another person that she could cling on to in case something happened to Debra, because she would be way too lost in the world if she didn't have someone to be anxiously attached to. Now, her mum doesn't know about her relationship, and Jennette and Joe kept their relationship very secret. They end up planning a trip to Hawaii, and Jennette tells her mum that she is going with her friends, and one of them is her gay friend. Debra always let her guard down when it came to this friend, because in her mind it's he's gay, so I don't have to worry about my precious Jennette getting caught up with him. So she lies and she says she's going with this friend to Hawaii, but she's actually going with Joe. While they are on this trip, paparazzi snap photos of her with Joe. Also, I should mention, this is an age gap relationship. So I'm I don't think it was an amazing relationship. I'm on Debra's side with thinking that this guy's not good for Jennette. But of course, I have very different reasons for being concerned about it, right? I'm concerned because it's an 18-year-old and a 32-year-old. And I feel Debra's just concerned because God forbid Jennette is close to anyone that isn't her. So because the paparazzi snap photos of them, Debra obviously finds out pretty soon after that Jennette is in fact in Hawaii with Joe and that they are an item. And her mum sends her a pretty nasty email. I will read it out. But yeah, I think it just really shows Debra's character. She writes, "Dear Net, I am so disappointed in you. You used to be my perfect little angel, but now you are nothing more than a little slut, a floozy all used up. And to think you wasted it on that hideous ogre of a man. I saw the pictures on a website called TMZ. I saw you in Hawaii with him. I saw you rubbing his disgusting hairy stomach. I knew you were lying about Colton." That's her friend. "Add that to the list of things you are. Liar, conniving, evil. You look pudgier too. It's clear you're eating your guilt. Thinking of you with his ding-dong inside you makes me sick. Sick. I raised you better than this. What happened to my good little girl? Where did she go? And who is this monster that has replaced her? You're an ugly monster now. I told your brothers about you, and they all said they disown you just like I do. We want nothing to do with you. Love, Mom." Or should I say Deb, since I am no longer your mother. "P.S. Send money for a new fridge. Ours broke." My goodness, I mean the name calling, horrific. But also the guilting her for having sex. This really pissed me off. She's making her feel ashamed of her body and making it sound like it's lost value because she's had sex, and she's done something irreversible and will never get her pure body back. I don't know. I hated everything about that. And then also the part where she's like, your brothers disown you too. She's like trying to make it out that everyone feels this way. She's like isolating Jennette. The whole family is disappointed in you. It's not just me. It's like everybody thinks this, so it must be true. And then the kicker, send money for a new fridge. Like, we're disowning you, but we're still using you. You still have to support us. So, you know, don't for 1 second think you can run off and live your own life because, hey, we need a fridge. Oh my God. Jennette says that Joe sees this email, sees how upsetting it is for Jennette, and he takes her phone and locks it in the little safe at the hotel because he's like, we don't need that energy, we're on vacation. So I guess it's good that he did that. And Jennette did say that Joe was like the first kind of person to help her see her mum's behavior from a different perspective. She describes that if she had been alone reading that email, she would instantly just take everything her mum had written as hard truth, and she would have never stopped to consider like, well, hang on, is that fair? Like, is that okay for her to be talking to me in this way? Whereas Joe was able to kind of do that and convince her that Debra wasn't a nice person. And this is kind of like the first sort of times that she's seeing her mum in a different light, I guess. Now, when Jennette eventually gets her phone back, she sees a ton of missed calls from Debra, and she also sees another email where Debra had told her that she was the reason her cancer came back. So yeah, super nasty. But she still didn't quite grasp like that her mother was abusive. You know, she was seeing her mum in a new light, but it didn't quite click into place yet. And she talks about in an interview that the first time she heard her mum being described as abusive was from a therapist, and that she like instantly walked out of there. She cancelled her therapy. She was like, no, like, I'm not, you know, I think it was a bit too much too soon, and she wasn't ready to overcome that yet or to deal with that fact. You know, in this interview, I think it's her Red Table Talk one, she says she had to overcome the quote, necessary delusion of her childhood, because this delusion that her mum was a good person and that her mum was trying to keep her safe and that her mum loved her and wasn't abusive, that's what protected her. That's what kept her going. It's not healthy for a child to know that their parent is an abuser. Like, that's a horrific reality. And the therapist that was on the interview actually said that this is something called betrayal blindness, and that it's really important. It's like a survival mechanism where it's important for a child to not think that their mother, someone who is meant to, you know, unconditionally love and protect them, could actually be the one harming them. Yeah, she really had to do a lot of work to come to terms with the fact that her mum was abusive and deal with, you know, how can I love this person but they were abusive to me, and just all those complicated feelings. And she didn't really accept the truth until she was about 23 or 24 years old. So it took a long time. And I guess that's the other thing, because she was so young and a child when this abusive pattern started happening, it was kind of all she knew. And so she didn't really understand that her reality or her relationship to her mum was so different. The other relationship that she brings up in this book is with a boyfriend who she calls Stephen. She dates Stephen when she's a bit older. I think she might have been with him when her mum passes away in 2013. So he was there for her time while she was on Sam and Cat. And Stephen actually notices that Jennette has bulimia. Even though her eating disorder started as anorexia, when she went on her country music tour, it developed into binge eating. And then from the binge eating, she slipped into bulimia, which at the start she felt was like the best of both worlds, because, oh my God, I can eat whatever I want and I can stay skinny and restrict my calories. So she felt like bulimia was like an amazing hack, and she went into it pretty like hard and fast, and throughout her life she would cycle through anorexia, binge eating, bulimia, but I feel like it was the bulimia that she would most predominantly stick to. And I think this also gave her like the worst side effects, if that makes sense. So her boyfriend Stephen notices her bulimia, and he says to her like, you need to get help for this or we can't be together. He kind of gives her an ultimatum. And you know, even though I'm not obsessed with his method of operating, I do appreciate him for being the reason why she ends up seeing an eating disorder specialist. Because at this point, her bulimia was life-threatening. Like, she was passing out from dehydration at parties. She was losing her teeth because the enamel was so worn down from her throwing up. And she was also throwing up like 12 to 15 times a day, which is nuts. Like, that's crazy. And so she hires an eating disorder specialist. They accompany her to events so they can monitor for signs. Yeah, as I said, Miranda Cosgrove is like one other person that she confided in. And so Miranda would also like look out for the signs with Jennette as well and support her through it. But I mean, this took years and years and years of work. And Jennette said now that she's completely overcome her eating disorder, which is like so impressive that she was able to do that, because she'd been experiencing disordered eating since 11. So yeah, anyway, I'm so proud of her that she was able to do that. That was kind of like Stephen's contribution, I guess. Now Stephen, his story takes like the craziest turn, because he ends up having schizophrenia and believes he is Jesus Christ, and then like leaves for a long stretch of time to kind of deal with all that. And then when he comes back, he like understands that he isn't actually Jesus Christ, but he's also grappling with this schizophrenia diagnosis, and he really turns to like self-medicating himself with marijuana as like an escape from his reality and to kind of get away from the fact that he's schizophrenic. And Jennette sees this, and I guess like in a weird way he's kind of a mirror to her, right? She doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want to escape from her problems the way that Stephen's doing, and this really motivates her to work hard to get to the cause of her issues and to continue with therapy and kick her disordered eating. So all of these relationships that she describes, the guy from the tour, Joe in Hawaii, and Stephen, I feel like the reason she talks about them, because I think she has dated other people outside of these three, but they each like taught her something about herself or about her relationship with her mom. But now she is in a healthy relationship. She's been in this relationship for the past 8 years, and they are not public. I don't think she's ever revealed who they are. So I'm really happy for her, and I hope that they're a good person. When Jennette turns 18, you know, Debra's cancer's back, so she isn't able to be as overbearing towards Jennette. And she's also wheelchair bound at this point and can't drive Jennette to and from set. Jennette didn't know how to drive at this point because Debra said to her there's no point wasting her time practicing to drive because she could be running lines during that time. Jennette decides to move out of the family home and get her own apartment, which is like closer to the studio lot. And she feels a bit of relief at this, you know, being able to carve out her own space and get some alone time. Now, shortly after Jennette gets this apartment, Deb asks to come over and watch a movie, and Jennette says she just knew that this one movie night would escalate into something more, and she was right. Debra asked to stay the night and then continued to stay every single night after that for 3 months. And you know, this was a 1-bedroom apartment, so Jennette had to share her bed with her mom, and she says that Debra, it wasn't just like they were sleeping side by side, like Debra would need to hug her the entire night and need that like physical closeness and dependency, and which is of course like so overwhelming for someone. I mean, like me personally, that would be my living nightmare. I need my own time and my own space, and I would get so claustrophobic living with someone like that. But at the same time, because they're so physically close, like Jennette can feel her mom's body is deteriorating from cancer. So how is she going to like set a boundary with someone like that, you know? In 2013, Sam and Cat TV show is released, and as I mentioned, Jennette was originally meant to get her own show, so the fact that she had to co-star alongside Ariana Grande already like pissed her off. Like it felt like she had been misled by Dan Schneider. What's worse on top of that is Ariana Grande was also like a rising starlet, so there was a lot of competition between them, but it felt like Ariana had special privileges whilst they were working on Sam and Cat. So, for example, there's a whole episode where Ariana Grande's character is like stuck in a box, and the only reason they wrote that is because then she didn't have to be in the episode and she could go and work on her album and do her music stuff alongside her acting stuff. And this annoyed Jennette because she'd never been shown any kind of leeway when it came to acting. Like she was always expected to do everything, to be on set, to show up. And, you know, there was no grace for her, which is crazy because, like, her mum is going through cancer and, like, in the final stages of her life. So if anyone on that set should be getting special privileges, like, it's Jennette. So her and Ariana are definitely not getting along, and, you know, she's kind of jealous of her in a way. And the only reason that Jennette is really sticking it out with Sam and Kat and continuing with the show is because Dan promises her that she can direct one of the episodes. And as we know, like, Jennette doesn't want to be an actor, but she's been so passionate about getting into that behind the scenes work, like writing or directing. So this is really her motivator for being complacent, is her shot at getting a directing debut, which also she sees as her, like, way out of acting, right? If she can prove herself as a director, then she can sustain her lifestyle and continue to provide for her family without the need to be an actor. So she's very excited. Towards the end of the show, because this show only lasted one season, towards the end, the network tells Jennette that she is no longer able to do her directing. And the reason they give to her for why she can't direct is that someone threatened to walk out of the show if Jennette was directing, and that this person, whoever they weren't named, was far too valuable or it would be way too expensive to replace. So immediately, I think people's minds probably go to Ariana Grande, right? Like, the other lead character whose name is in the title. Like, if she walks out, it's going to be a massive clusterfuck. So, but then it's weird to me because, like, Jennette is also a high value member of the show. So, like, why couldn't she threaten the same way? I don't know. I don't actually know if it was Ariana. Like, it doesn't really make sense to me why Ariana would be so pressed at Jennette directing something, because as far as I can tell, at this point, Ariana was really into her music. That was already, you know, the other thing she had going for her. It's not like she herself was an aspiring director as well. I've seen people speculate that it could have been Ariana's management just trying to make sure that there were no favorites on set. And then the other thing I've seen circling, which I think this is kind of the basket that I'm putting my eggs into, is that the network just lied. They just made up an excuse. They held this directing thing over Jennette to get her to cooperate, and they never had any intention of actually letting her direct. She writes, "I realized that I've been foolish. I believed that these people would do what they said they would. Now that I've shown up to work every day, been a professional, swallowed my anger, and carried a show for almost 40 episodes, now that they've gotten what they wanted out of me, they're taking away the very reason why I was doing all of those things in the first place." And at this point in time, Jennette is really struggling in her life. Like, I would say her time on Sam and Cat is when she hits this all-time low. Like, her eating disorders are ramped up. She actually develops an alcohol addiction. At the same time, Debra's life is coming to an end. And while all this is happening in her personal life, she's then going to a soundstage that is, like, brightly lit up and acting out the most ridiculous storylines and being this, like, funny and upbeat character. And she says it was just such a, like, fucked up dichotomy for someone to experience, like, just the most complete opposite worlds, and she had, like, a foot in both of them. When she finds out that the show is going to get cancelled, she is over the moon. She is so excited. Her agents tell her that Nickelodeon wants to give her $300,000, and she's like, oh my gosh, like, why? You know, why would they give me this? And her agents tell her, think of it kind of like a little gift. Oh, and also, they don't want you to ever talk about your experiences on Nickelodeon publicly, and they don't want you to talk about the creator. And she's like, so it's hush money. And her agent's like, no, think of it as, like, free money. And she's like, no, it's hush money. And she declines. She turns it down. She says, what the fuck? Nickelodeon is offering me $300,000 in hush money to not talk publicly about my experience on the show? My personal experience of the creator's abuse? This is a network with shows made for children. Shouldn't they have some sort of moral compass? Shouldn't they at least try to report to some sort of ethical standard? I lean back against the headboard of my bed and cross my legs out in front of me. I extend my arms behind my head and rest them there in a gesture of pride. Who else would have the moral strength? I just turned down $300,000. And honestly, good for her. That would not have been easy to do. That's a significant amount of money. But also, how shady from Nickelodeon. What the fuck? Now, the other thing Jennette sort of talks about in her memoir is that she really struggled with being famous. And she says, I realize that this feels very whiny of me, and this is literally people's dream, and like there are so many people who would trade places with me in an instant. But she really didn't like being famous. She didn't like being recognized. She didn't like not having a private life. Again, I think we see her kind of leaning towards more of that like production side of entertainment, where you're behind the camera and you're not going to get recognized as much or be stopped. As a writer, you could be completely anonymous. You could write under a pseudonym. No one would ever really have to know who you were. But then the other thing that really got to her is that she was famous for something that she did as a kid. And so to her, it felt like she was just perpetually stuck as being a child, or people viewing her as a child. And of course, this plays in hand with her experience of living with Debra, and Debra constantly convincing her that she was not grown up and, still a child. She says, quote, I'm cemented in people's minds as the person I was when I was a kid, a person I feel like I've far outgrown. But the world won't let me outgrow it. The world won't let me be anyone else. The world only wants me to be Sam Puckett. And she has said that she has, since leaving Nickelodeon, never looked back at a single episode that she filmed. She completely distances herself from those shows. Like, she can't, she says she's glad that people enjoyed them and that children have like good memories of watching them and that people grow up with them. But she says for herself, like, that is a time in her life that she doesn't want to revisit. Now, in 2013, 3 months after Sam and Cat first airs, her mum Debra passes away. She recalls going to see her mum on her deathbed, and Debra was in a coma at this point, and she says her and her brothers were each going to give their last words to her, and they were each trying to get their mum to wake up by telling her some exciting news. One brother was like, Mum, I'm getting married. The other brother was like, hey, I'm moving back to California, like trying to give her like a lust for life, I guess. And Jennette says when she walks up, she knows exactly what she can tell her mum, and she is so convinced that this will work. And she tells her mum, I'm so thin, I'm only 89 pounds. Of course, Debra doesn't wake up from her coma, but right up to her dying moments, the thing that Jennette knew would impress her mum the most was her weight. Oh my gosh, it makes me so sad. And she truly thought that her news would be the thing to wake Debra up. Her being thin, that was the thing that Debra valued above anything else. And Jennette really struggled once her mum died. Obviously now in the aftermath, she can see that she really needed her mum to pass away so that she could heal from her trauma and become the person that she is now. But at the time, you're not going to be able to see that. So yeah, her eating disorder ramped up. She had her alcohol addiction. She was in this weird relationship with someone experiencing schizophrenia. Like, it was all really crashing down. And then 1.5 years after her mum's death, she finds out from her dad that he is actually not her biological dad. That only one of her brothers is his biological son, and the rest of them are not biologically related to him. And this is a part of the book that I was not prepared for at all. I was like, oh my gosh, hasn't this girl been through enough? Now she has to find out this life-altering information. She does say that her dad always felt really distanced from her. She never felt close to him, and so it kind of gave her a reason, although not really, because biological child or not, he was her dad. So he really should have stepped up and been there for her, even though this might help her make sense of his aloofness towards her. I was like, no, he is not off the hook in my mind. Anyway, after finding out who her actual biological dad is, she decides to meet him. and he's actually a jazz musician. So her and a group of her friends, they go to one of the gigs he's playing. Miranda's one of the people who goes with her. And after the gig, she goes backstage and meets him and, you know, tells him who she is. And they talk, they meet up a couple of other times after that, but essentially they never form a close relationship. And this is kind of the sad thing for Jennette, because I think we see her trying to have, like, really making an effort to find a parental figure who's going to be good. And, you know, finding out that Mark wasn't her dad kind of gave her another chance, because, oh my gosh, maybe my biological dad will be that person. And then it still didn't work out. And yeah, anyway. But that's crazy. Like, I can't imagine finding something out like that. That would really alter everything. So where is Jennette McCurdy at now? She hasn't acted since she was about 24. She's now 32. I don't think she will ever return to acting. In 2021, Miranda reached out to her, kind of vibe checking whether Jennette would be interested in doing an iCarly reboot. And Jennette kind of said to her, like, no amount of money would get me to sign up to that. So she turned it down. She feels like she's at a point now where she is truly herself. She's healed a lot. She's recovered a lot from working through the abuse she went through and working through, you know, unlearning some of those behaviors that she had held herself to. She's battled her eating disorder, which is so impressive. I think now she's kind of just living a bit more of a, like, under the radar life. I think she's done a bit of directing and writing work. She's also got a couple more book deals because of how successful her memoir is, so we might potentially see some more work from her. I will definitely be reading anything that she writes. I just love the way that she writes. I love her style. And yeah, I think she's just doing good. Like, I think she's just chilling, and that makes me so happy for her. Like, I want nothing more than for her to just live her most wholesome, best life. And in the future, I mean, I hope that she continues to write. I hope that she maybe someday gets to write a television show or a screenplay for a movie or something. Like, I would love to see some of her, like, production work. But of course, if she never wants to work again, she's been working since she was 6, so I would not hold that against her. But that is all I have for this episode. Do check out I'm Glad My Mum Died if you haven't read it. You can also, there's an audiobook which Jennette reads out if reading's not your thing. And yeah, I've heard the audiobook's really good, and of course the written book is amazing too, so do check those out. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast if you enjoy the show, and please feel free to leave a written review or comment. I love my words of affirmation. And you can connect with me on socials at Mood for Feud. If you'd like to buy me a coffee, I have a link in the show notes, and all funds will go towards upgrading my podcast gear. I hope everyone is crushing their goals this week, and of course, keeping out of trouble. Don't get into any feuds, and I will talk to you all next week. I actually will this time, I promise. Bye.